so picking up with tubular secretion, we're talking about the last step in urine formation. And, this is taking place mostly throughout the nephron. You have a picture in your notes, PDF notes, that is slightly different, but basically the same concept of, again, secretion is talking about things coming from the blood going into the nephron. And one of those things that you saw on your notes that we took, here's the potassium and hydrogens that were shown on the notes packet that you did that should look exactly like this, which, by the way, these are all haiku answer keys for the Australian notes is what I call them. But one of the things that was not mentioned in that part of the notes that you should know is secretion of hydrogen ions. And again, pH is all about hydrogen ions, and so secretion of hydrogens is going to help to regulate the acidity of the blood, the pH of the blood. Taking hydrogens out of the blood will be reducing the amount of reducing the pH. The opposite be true for increasing. So one problem with this secretion issue is things like antibiotics, penicillin, that can be secreted and put into the nephron and excreted in your urinary system. That would obviously reduce the ability for the penicillin to take care of the bacterial infection that you're trying to take care of. Here's the juxtaglomerular apparatus. One thing that was sort of mentioned in that notes packet that I'd like you to know a little bit more specifically is that the juxtaglomerular apparatus is monitoring salt levels and is stimulated by low salt levels in the blood. So I put this here in red to make it obvious that this is something that you need to know. I get a better picture of this on the next slide. You have a pretty good picture of this in your notes. It might be a little bit small, but again, you can always refer back to this or your book. And then there's some other things here that are just structural. Macula densa, which is actually where the salt regulation is taking place. These cells are specifically picking up the salt content, and you saw this in the notes that you took. The notes that you took on the notes packet down here. The macula densa cells are detecting the sodium chloride, and again, those are these guys here that are lining the distal convoluted tubule that is touching the afferent and efferent arterioles and the cells that are kind of in between there making up this apparatus. Something else I'd like you to know is going back to the notes packet that you did, the extraglomerular or just mesangial cells is how you could have labeled it in your picture. Going back to this first page of the notes packet, mesangial cells are constricting and relaxing to allow more or less filtration. They're changing their size. It's basically changing the space between them, allowing more filtration or less filtration to the capillary, to and from the capillary. So that's the job of these guys and some of these other cells, is to constrict and relax, basically increasing and decreasing the amount of filtration to the capillaries, to the blood supply coming through there. So again, picking up low levels in the blood is going to stimulate it to secrete renin. Here's the kind of diagram that is also very similar in your book that I've also given you the video for the Australian guys. Notes of these things, and so instead of me taking time in this video and repeating, here's the kind of diagram that shows you where everything's coming from, The conversion of angiotensin 1 and 2, this is the RAA system animation, referring to the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system of regulation that's taking place here at the juxtaglomerular apparatus. And here's the things that happens: vasoconstriction, secretion of the steroid, the hormone, is going to increase salt reabsorption, which increases water reabsorption, and then also going to make you thirsty. There's where your thirst comes from. And the result of this is a decrease in urine output because it's reabsorbing. Remember, reabsorption of water means less water, and then being excreted means less urine. So the overall result is less urine output. Here's something that came up in your study guide that's in your notes. It is also part of the RAA, which is the renin angiotensin aldosterone system, which there's a separate video of. But basically, it's this hormone is released in the heart, the actual muscles, the cardiac cells, and it's stimulated by increased blood pressure, which obviously this is atrial, so it's talking about heart and part of the heart that is going to be changing size and shape because of the blood coming through. And here's the result is going to cause an increase in output, urine output, but urine and other things. So the result of the atrial natriuretic peptide is going to be an increase in urine output. So see the difference here between a decrease in urine output here from aldosterone, and the increase in the urine output here, the ANP system. Diuretics, which is, you have the ADH, antidiuretic hormone here, which is also increasing reabsorption of water. So you should have this already written down. Aldosterone, we just talked about. ADH, it's a diuretic. So diuretics are controlling urine output. Antidiuretic would just be decreasing urine output. That's the one that you have on the notes packet that you took from the video that you had in class. Here's just a simple anatomy thing that, again, it's just something that you had in the study guide, order of the parts. Again, here's the whole entire system. So we're talking about the kidney, which is nephron, collecting duct, minor calyx, major calyx, ureter on each side, bladder, which we'll get to in just a second, and then urethra out of the body. Again, here's the after the kidney part, which is making up a small portion of this unit. Most of this unit focuses on within the kidneys, glomerulus and nephron. So again, there's your two kidneys, so two ureters. They have 3 layers, and this is taking us back to kind of what we saw already in other units that we've covered, like digestive system, where we covered your peristalsis, which are the wave-like contractions that move stuff through the digestive system. And since this is similar, this is part of the excretory system, which the digestive system is part of. It's doing the same thing, so forcing the urine down these tubes. It's going to come out at the openings in the bladder. First, one of the problems that arises are kidney stones that sometimes, here's a picture here, the concentrations, again, if the concentrations in the nephron are messed up, you're going to have a buildup of crystallization of stuff that should be flowing out in a liquid form, starting to build up and possibly cause a blockage in the ureter, which would be pretty painful and pretty problematic, and then possibly leading to a blockage, not causing things to be excreted to the bladder and going out the body. And so here's the rest of it. Urinary bladder has some layers that you should be pretty familiar with. Serous coat of the watery fluid that's going to be made. And obviously this is the storage of urine and excretion of urine. out the urethra. Here's some of the details. Here's the muscle, the smooth muscle that is not under your control. Smooth muscle that is making up most of the bladder. There are muscles that you can control and pull and push on that you should have seen in the first slide. Some of the muscles that are your abdominal muscles and so forth that are helping to excrete urine from the bladder. The trigon, which is this pretty much just triangular formation between the two holes where the ureters come in, which are right here. There's a hole here, and here's a hole here, one for each ureter. Basically the tissue that is basically a continuance of these holes and the urethra, which is just kind of triangular shape, which is basically funneling the urine into the urethra, which is just the opening to the rest of the world. And the last thing here is micturition, which is just the urinary reflex, basically. And you have a couple questions on this information on the test, so make sure you look this over and make sure this makes sense. There's partially involuntary control and partially voluntary control based on the sphincters and abdominal muscles that can help get rid of that urine. So that's our run through of urinary notes. Make sure your study guide and this packet make the most sense to you. And if anything on here doesn't make sense, refer back to your notes that you just went through, and then if that doesn't make sense, you have worksheets in your book, multiple places to find this information.